if you focus on wilderness, as I said before, it becomes a giant mirror. And so it's in some ways a very essential way to tell a story, to tell it through a landscape.
And what makes it to a mirror?
It's a mirror because it doesn't have any meaning by itself. The wilderness doesn't actually mean anything on its own. It only means what we make it to mean. And so as soon as you place people in wilderness, as you describe the wilderness, you're describing the people. And that's something that came about through two things, through what I was reading and through my own experience. My experience was that, like, the first salmon I caught was taller than I was, my first king salmon. And that was really amazing. I fought it on the pole for 45 minutes. I was being pulled down the river. My dad was holding my back to hold on to me. And that just felt like a battle, you know, with that fish. And then my grandfather caught a 350-pound halibut, which is like 100 kilos or so. And I remember that fish was so big that it couldn't be pulled up off the surface or off the bottom, because it would know it was moving and then it would just clamp down. So my dad had to use his fingertips on the fishing line, just bit by bit. I mean, this thing that seemed impossible to me, that you could bring up a huge fish by fingertips. And it took a long time, you know, it was 100 meters to come up. And I remember looking over the side of the boat and seeing the color of the water was about the same color as the back of a halibut. It was like a dark brown green. And I remember trying to imagine seeing the fish, and I just saw sunspots, and then finally I saw it. But then it became bigger and bigger and bigger as it came up to the surface. And by the time it got up to the boat, it was just impossible. It was something I couldn't even imagine, it was so big. And I always think of that as a metaphor for how writing works with wilderness, that if you just pay attention to it, it shifts and it shapes and it grows and it becomes different things and it starts to suggest. And so that's what writing about that landscape is like for me in Alaska. But it also comes from writers that I really like, because I really love reading other landscape writers. So Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian, for instance, he talks about a line of mountains, a ridge line in the southwest of the U.S., and he talks about them having their true geology was not stone but fear. And he always does that kind of extension from the literal landscape to the figurative. So instead of stone, we go to the abstract noun of fear, and that's how we start to feel theme developing and what the landscape is about and what the book is about. And you can also see that in Faulkner, which is where Cormac McCarthy borrows that from, and in Annie Proulx and Marilyn Robinson and Elizabeth Bishop's poems. And so that's what I really love to read also, is that kind of extension of the actual landscape into a figurative landscape.